This video introduces the concept of genre, New Testament genres, and New Testament subgenres. I'm going to start us out by looking at some modern genres. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the screen right here, and take a look at these different movie posters and see how many different kinds of movie genres you can identify amongst these posters and what the similarities between the different movies are. So what different genres of movie do we have present here, and which categories would each movie fit into? So I'll give you some of my thoughts on these films, and these are largely randomly pulled simply by Googling different genres of movies. So I first Googled romance movie posters, and some of the ones that came up that I would classify as romance movies are going to be The Notebook, Casablanca, and then some of the wild cards here. You might not have been able to identify this movie's genre simply by the poster. If you aren't familiar with the film, Call Me by Your Name. But you can get a sense even from the movie poster here of what genre the film is based on how the people are portrayed in it. So in the cases of our romance film, we get the sense that they are romance films by the fact that we have two people kind of close to each other approaching an embrace in the case of Call Me by Your Name, or a kiss in the case of The Notebook or Casablanca. So we sort of naturally intuit, even if we don't know anything about these films, we might naturally intuit that these are romance films. Other genres here, moving over, we have Tommy Boy and the Johnsons, and maybe Shrek in the category of comedy. Shrek is an exception perhaps to the comedy, or we might say is a subgenre of comedy, namely family or children's comedy. And with these movie posters, we can tell that they might, or we might suggest to us that they are comedies by sort of their lightness of color, the way that the persons are looking sort of towards us and smiling. They look a bit more jovial. Moving over, we have Amityville Horror and The Shining as examples of horror films, much darker portrayal on the movie posters, much darker colors, blacks and reds, suggesting something to us. And then we have action films in the case of Indemnity and Acceleration. And now I see up here we might put these up in Shrek into that same subcategory of family film or family comedy. Action films are going to be indicated by certain things that are present here. So in both of these, we have firearms on the movie poster. We have people looking sort of intense. We have explosions. In Shrek, in the case of Shrek, we also have an explosion, which is maybe sort of playfully playing on the action film genre, or the poster of an action film genre. Cars, so different things within the poster itself are suggesting to us an action film here. And in the case with Enemy, and maybe also Call Me by Your Name, we sort of have this indie feel to the movie poster. We get the sense that these are maybe sort of thoughtful films. In different kinds of ways, maybe dramatic films. So in contrast to action, they're more sort of introspective. And I ask you to do this for a couple of different reasons, because we're going to pull out from this exercise some different features of genre and ways that we might think about genre. And to do so, I first want to give us a very, very brief definition of genre. And you'll see different kinds of definitions of genre out there. In our reading from Michael Gorman for the week, you'll get a specific definition of genre that might differ slightly from this one and from other definitions of genre. But generally speaking, genre is going to be sort of a category. It's going to be a catch-all form or type of composition that can be identified by different clusters of literary conventions. So we're going to see multiple different conventions within one genre. So those conventions and those features are present, and they're going to be present across multiple texts. And text here means more than just a written text. So a movie would count as a text when we're talking about genre. So what we're going to see with genres is that we have similarities across them, but those similarity in convention and features, but those conventions and features are going to be played out differently in different ways. So the aspects of horror, the features of horror in The Shining are going to be different than the features of horror in Amityville Horror, but we're still going to be able to recognize those as sort of shared conventions or shared features. The same thing with comedy, the same thing with action, the same thing with romance. There's going to be these sort of plot lines, there's going to be things that the characters do that are similar to one another, but they are able to riff in different ways so that every text within the genre is not identical to other texts within the genre. So to move to put some of this into maybe more bullet point format, these conventions and features of genre are going to be both fixed and flexible. That is to say, there needs to be a certain amount of them within a given text to be able to identify that text as a genre, but they're also going to be able to change from text to text. Genres can contain subgenres. So when we gave the example of comedies, family comedy or family film might sort of be a subgenre of comedy. And genres also mix with one another. So you could have sort of an indie horror film, or in some maybe really weird case, a romantic horror film. So there's elements of the other genres that make their way into different genres, but you still see sort of one genre tends to predominate. So you can think of sort of an umbrella genre, and under that umbrella genre, you have different subgenres. And then this means that texts in a genre are going to be similar to and different from one another. No two texts in the genre are going to be identical, but they're going to be recognizable as similar to one another because of their shared conventions. And genres really have a sort of practical function. We know what to expect when we recognize a genre. My expectation for watching a romantic film is going to be very different from my expectation of watching a horror film. And we know those expectations based on our past experiences of genre. So genre is something that is sort of intuited. We know it by experience. We're not necessarily taught the features of genre. It more comes out of our experience of the media. And those mediums are all also going to be culturally conditioned. That is to say, we experience genres in different ways, in different cultures, and in different times. So a romantic film or a romantic book in one culture might be very different from a romantic book or a romantic film in another culture. So the sort of our cultures establish these different conventions and these different features and sort of fix them in different ways. And so when we move to the genres of the New Testament, we need to be aware that our own cultural conditioning of genre is going to be different than the New Testament's cultural conditions of genre. And in fact, the New Testament's conditioning around media and kinds of text is going to be very different than our own experience of mediums and media and kinds of text in an electronic or digital age. So to move over to New Testament genres, and here on this slide, we are looking backwards, not forwards. That is to say, we are looking backwards onto what is now the canonical collection of the New Testament and thinking about how first we might group the contents of the New Testament together, not looking from the historical perspective of what were the genres at the time and how do those represent what is found in the New Testament. So as to sort of our backwards look or our backwards grouping of New Testament genres, we're going to have Gospels. In the case of the three synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John, we're going to have the book of Acts. We're going to have letters written by Paul mostly, but also by other New Testament authors. And then we're going to have one apocalypse in the form of Revelation. So these are sort of our really big umbrella categories, how we might group the different texts of the New Testament together. But even within these categories, we're going to have subgenres, different kinds of gospels, different kinds of letters. And even within the gospels and within letters, there's going to be particular subgenres. So, or we might think of these as sort of subforms, or you'll often see this called just forms. And how we're going to close out this video is I'm simply going to give you a list of these subgenres that you might find in narrative text and the subgenres you might find in letter text. And we're not going to talk about these extensively or really at all. I give you these sort of as a reference point for your recognition so that when you go to a New Testament text, you sort of have different terms and categories and subgenres of thinking about what a particular passage might be. So here we go with respect to narrative subgenres. You can see that we have different kinds of subgenres here. Most of them up on this side are going to be related to speeches, to speaking. In most cases in the narratives, this is going to be Jesus speaking. And then we also have sort of more story type things where the focus is on the action, not on what is said necessarily in these latter ones here. And then everything on the right hand category is sort of, you might say, more practical subgenres that sort of convey information in a more maybe sterile kind of way or a more objective kind of way. And moving over to letters, we have all those different internal features of letters, and these are largely going to be right here if we just sort of mark out a letter in the New Testament, and particularly a Pauline letter. We would generally find most of those things in the letters, and that's really sort of the component parts of a letter. And then moving from there and thinking especially about the body of a letter, we're going to find different things within the body of a letter, different kinds of speeches, whether they be divinely revealed apocalyptic speeches, different speech forms. So the way we give speeches differ from one context to another, that there's sort of different styles of giving speeches. The same is true of the ancient world. We're going to find different kinds of speeches in ancient letters. And then also different sort of again, practical elements in the letters, or existing genres that might exist outside of a letter that are brought into a letter. So a list of good and bad things that different people or different groups do, household codes stating how to live, the literary form of chiasms, midrash, sort of a further explanation of a particular text, usually a text from the Septuagint or the Hebrew Bible. So again, all of these subgenres are those things that you're going to find within a text. So when you are working and doing exegesis on a particular passage, it behooves you not only to think about the umbrella category, that is, what kind of text is the New Testament book you are working with, whether it be a gospel, a letter, or something else. But it would also behoove you to think about the subgenre of text, identifying what the specific literary form of your particular passage is.